other things can take over. I've seen Jerry Levin was one of the other famous neuroscientists who would take a frog, cut out the visual edge detectors, and then the part of the brain that handles language in humans would take over and learn edge detectors. So what Freeman was arguing is there must be a universal learning principle here. It's not that we're born with 10,000 specific algorithms. There's a universal learning principle. What is it? And my theory is that it's actually the sum of about 2 or 3 things in the human. But the first and most obvious thing is a prediction system which learns to predict. And there were experiments done by Nikolaos and Shapin where they would take a rat which had inputs from its whiskers. They found cells nearby that could predict the whisker tweaking in the future. They would break the circuit with a lesion, and then after learning, it would predict again. That's evidence of learning to predict in the brain. There's a lot of other evidence, but there's not a lot of time, so I have to jump over important things. Let me mention, there is also anatomical evidence of clock pulses here. This is from a real picture of real cortical pyramid neurons. And there is input here which acts as a gating modulator. It's not just one other subset of input. It's non-specific input from the non-specific thalamus, which provides regular timing signals, and that's critical to making it work if you claim that it is using some kind of backpropagation to train the recurrent neural network, which makes predictions. And a lot of people didn't pay attention to that because it's not an asynchronous model. It has clocks. People in systems neuroscience kept telling me the brain has clocks. Not just daily clocks, but 8 Hertz clocks. Okay. Bottom line is, the empirical tests are in an open access journal, and I report the empirical data which strongly supports that there are forward and backward passes in the brain. People have assumed there aren't, but if you look at the actual data and evaluate, are there forward and backward passes, the very best real-time data we have in the brain shows there are forward and backward passes in the cerebral cortex. God, does that require more time? I'm sorry I don't have more time because there's something else that's important going on here. Okay, let's see if we can get to the next important thing. Well, I have to even move on further. The risks and opportunities we face in this space are huge. There are times when I wonder, God, why did I do this backpropagation? Have I created a Frankenstein? Will it destroy us or not? There are some real heavy risks. We are at a crossroads right now. I went to Silicon Valley a few weeks ago for a group called the Millennium Project, which is the #1 international effort to study the future of humanity. They've done studies of the future of work in 20 years. They say, if you think the politics of the world look crazy this year, you haven't seen anything yet. You've seen what happens when the workers worry about their jobs. We've seen somebody get elected here because he said, damn it, I'll bring back your jobs, and they don't care. And I've seen people in Europe that came close. You think politics are crazy now? If unemployment gets to 70% due to automation, you'll learn what crazy politics really are. This is serious stuff. This is not just our little corner of the world. So Silicon Valley is worried about this. A lot of people are worried about it. And some of the scenarios I've seen today are really frightening. There are 2 or 3 scenarios where the world goes to pot, and then there are these optimistic scenarios where Kurzweil saved us and we download our brains to computers and everything is great. And I have to say the optimistic scenarios worry me more than the pessimistic scenarios. We need to create a new scenario. And it has to be created by people who know information technology. That's you. This is your job. Okay? Really, the world needs you because we need new information technology to come up with a new paradigm. Somebody from the Heritage House asked me to summarize my view in 30 seconds of the future of the world for their political purposes. God, how do you do it? Well, this is what I said to the Heritage person. I said, for millions of years, DNA ruled our lives. Then economics became a new intelligent system managing humanity. We never quite got it right. We know the wrong economic system could destroy the world, the wrong one, the right one might be okay. But now, before we solve the economic system problem, we have an IT system problem. IT is also about to run the entire world, even more than money does. And if we get the wrong IT system, we could literally all die. So it's kind of important to get the right system. There is past history of technology having huge effects on the life of people. With Chinese folks in the room, I hate to say, it's the means of production, you know. Okay? There are choices about the means of production which affect the rest of society. We had experience with IBM, with a system called Wilbur. You're lucky if you don't know about it. I compare it to the people who sacrificed virgins to the volcano gods. The Wilbur operating system was really that bad, and it was oppressing the whole world until we had the PC revolution. Will the next generation be liberating, or will it be oppressing? It really could be either way. Okay. So it depends on the IT paradigms. I guess I have to leave off some other important slides, like the citations of future humanity. But the bottom line is, there are people with a lot of power who think of expert systems as the future of the world. I've seen people with a business plan to control the entire world, the Internet of Things, using intelligent systems like Watson, which doesn't even have values. And if you think that sounds risky, if you knew better, you would know it's a total disaster. And it's a threat, clear and present today. Even the reinforcement learning, the best reinforcement learning we have today, is still based on a single utility function. We need to develop a new paradigm, extending reinforcement learning to multi-agents, getting to the human side, the human potential benefits of this understanding, which is really critical. Teachers for humans, collaboration for humans. We need really unbreakable operating systems, which is not what you get from today's security concerns. So we need a new kind of operating system, and quantum technology is part of it. For the new kind of operating system, you haven't heard of the technology. I don't have time to tell you about it. But if you go to the website, these citations will tell you what kind of new technologies we need, and you haven't even heard of them. Things are changing. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much. And, yes, so now we have time for some questions. Those who want to have, please come forward. Here's the microphone. And just before that, I would like to present this certificate to Paul for the talk. Yes. Okay.
Great talk. Everything you had there, from fun to seriousness to information systems, everything, mathematics. I didn't understand the end of your talk, so I can see that with the advanced system, people will be unemployed. But you suggest with some better systems, they will not be unemployed. Do you mind to explain why some systems will cause unemployment while others will not?
Yeah. I don't claim to have the whole answer of the right new system. That's why we need a lot of people to work on it. This is the embarrassing thing where I can give part of the answer and pose the question. I do know what the top-down people want to do. There are a few people in the room who will design a utility function to maximize their utility function. I hate to compare it to Lamar Smith. Okay? I can even give you an example, if you forgive me. On the web, if you're interested in real industry, okay? There are two websites you might look at. One is Accenture, and one is DCX. And Accenture has this vision. We will defend our clients will revolutionize and reform the world, and they show a picture of their clients, which are robots. Okay? And the issue of robots versus humans is there. There's a certain way of thinking. There's a certain, I would say, cockeyed way of thinking, a bad paradigm, where you think about efficiency in a certain way that makes you want to get rid of humans. So I can give you some personal views if you want.
let's have some more.
Okay, good, okay.
Hey, I've got kind of a fun question for you here. How many people here have actually read Paul's thesis? I know I have, and it's a great thesis. And you mentioned it should be part of education. Here's my question: with the invention of TensorFlow and the automation of everything that's in your thesis, do we really need to read it now? That's a fun question.
No, I understand. I've played with a lot of fields, like analytics for political science. And there were a lot of people who felt their students didn't need to learn the mathematics behind multiple regression. Just push the buttons. And my claim is that when people push the buttons without knowing what they're doing, when people put electrical current into the brain and they don't have any idea how the brain works, you can generate disasters like you wouldn't believe. I believe that we need a new paradigm with human potential, where we encourage every human on Earth to develop the deepest level of understanding, mathematics, mental capability. Forgive me, I'm seeing Don, and there are some people who would use a language, it would say, what is God's language? Is it Latin? I would believe it's mathematics. And we got to learn to speak that language, we need to understand it, and we shouldn't take shortcuts of letting other people do our thinking for us. Everybody should learn calculus if possible, and they should learn the different types of partial derivatives, because if we want to understand ourselves, we have to understand the mathematics. We cannot truly understand ourselves until we truly understand the mathematics.
It's funny because my question is almost the opposite of the previous one, same subject, but Don Wunsch in 2014 in Beijing gave a plenary talk and mentioned some of the issues that still remain and some of the understanding related to the difference between backpropagation and ordered derivatives in the more full version that you had in the thesis. So my question was, isn't it important to bring out that expression ordered derivatives to differentiate it from what a lot of people are doing in a more simplistic form today? Like, are there a lot of work even in deep learning that's missing a more full understanding of what ordered derivatives and chain rule are, and they're ending up with structures that are actually not correct?
Okay, so I certainly haven't done a survey of everything that's incorrect. I know there's a lot. It would take a lifetime to survey all of the forms of error that exist. They are countless. I can say that on my Mind website, I posted a paper on automatic differentiation, written for kind of mathematical type people who don't know neural nets, but could make sense of it. And I talk about what the general form buys you. It buys you a lot of things, but above all, it buys you understanding what you're doing. And I should also make a further comment. Way back at the time of the thesis, I said, okay, I know how to compute these derivatives exactly. But when I think of the real needs of a learning system, ultimately you're going to want to have a bit of modulation. And there are things like quasi-Newton methods. There are ways of using derivatives and modulating them on the fly, which are not precisely the same thing. I have been a little surprised that modulated backpropagation hasn't taken off. I've occasionally thought of collaborating with Robert on that, but there were too many other things to work on.
Yeah, I'd like to talk very much. Thank you. So I like the political and economic angle also towards the end of the talk, which is what leads me to the question, which is one thing that's concerning most of the world today is severe income inequality.
Yes.
Now, you talked about people that should be educated and know about derivatives and so on. I teach at an engineering college. My students are, like, average SAT score in the US, 50%.
Yeah.
They are not trained to do any of this stuff at all.
Yeah.
I don't think they will ever do it. That's my assessment. Very, very difficult. So my question is, there seems to be polarization even in the education field.
Yeah.
That we don't have the people, we don't have the necessary talent and the necessary background that we will need to educate all these people. So what is your take on that?
Well, it's certainly serious. The issue of human potential. I was talking about lifelong learning. and we have K to 12 and STEM education. We all know these are important. I worry whether people are competent who are pursuing it. So I'm more worried about the talent of the people who are implementing the goal than I am about the human students at the other end of it. It's such a huge subject. Robert would be mad at me if I gave this subject the detail that it deserves. But I really think humans have potential. In Neural Networks 2012, I pointed out a simple paradox. How is it that a simple neural net with 100 neurons could outperform a human brain with 100 billion neurons in certain tasks like stock trading? And there are books out. There's a guy named Lewis who's written books on, gee, analytics beat humans every time. Well, how can a neural net with 100 neurons outperform humans every time? Why? And I would say the difference is that the things in a box pay attention. And humans haven't learned to use this powerful machinery they have. So humans can learn to outperform these systems, but we're not born with sanity even. We're not even born with honesty. And there are things we have to learn, but if we learn them, we can outperform supercomputers. So human potential is a very, very big part of this future program. It's the one I care about the most, to be honest.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for the questions and answers. Okay, so now it's a break. I just remind you that there will be a panel here on security in the same room after the break. In addition